maybe. And we will record this session and put it on the website after. So if you know people who would benefit from this, it's available. So this panel brings together scholars who truly are at the forefront of digital humanities and Daoist studies to explore how different kinds of computational methods can be used by all of us to study Daoist texts, canons, traditions. So today we'll look at a range of different tools. We'll look at large language model assisted translation workflows. We'll look at digitally driven investigations of one text, Duren jing, and its commentarial tradition. We'll look at large scale textual databases designed to map Daoist textual corpora, especially more recent texts. So our forum today highlights
哎，
Our forum today highlights how digital tools can enhance close reading, translation, textual comparison, things that we're all engaged in, while also raising new methodological questions about ways of interpreting, issues of authority, and general scholarly practice. Thanks to Jonathan Pettit here for really spearheading this event, and for Elena in the background, who is the operator today. We have three papers. We're supposed to have four, but He Size of Beijing Foreign Studies University, Beijing 外国语大学, couldn't make it, unfortunately. We apologize for that. But we have two papers. And so the first paper, or the first presentation, really, is by Konstantinos Konopakakis and Jonathan Pettit of the University of Hawaii on designing an LLM-powered translation workflow for pre-modern Daoist texts as a philological tool. So, Jonathan, take it away, and Konstantinos,
Yeah,
go ahead.
thank you so much, David and Elena, for having us all here today and keeping us on track. Okay, everybody see it's okay. Yeah, so this presentation is on a tool that Konstantinos and I are developing and looking for collaborators or looking for money. Right now we were calling it the eating, the translation tripod. But that's the tool that will hopefully someday build. So keep going, please, Konstantinos. Next slide. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so just in general, I mean, just kind of stating the obvious, the Taoist scriptures and the multiple canons and the multiple kinds of Taoism, the translations that we have are just a fraction of what exists. So, I mean, it's just what we have access to of studies are small in proportion to the size of the canons. Even just it's not always a problem, but just like people approach things with different translation styles. So even if in the classroom, if we're looking at scripture, sometimes it can be hard to adapt between different translations. So just like yeah, I guess this project was born to try to think about AI translation as a way forward with Tao scriptures. Or so next slide. So I think a year ago we started and kind of encountered a lot of problems. Putting in just kind of coming from Kanipo and putting in a text. The AI would often have trouble interpreting it, or kind of knowing when to how to translate it, right? And the different meanings of characters would sometimes cause it to translate unexpectedly and definitely inconsistently. We'll get lazy, and like the paragraph quality gets less and less as you prompt it. And you can do it, but it also becomes very tedious to the level, at least that I find, that translations like paragraph by paragraph is as most as it can do fairly well. So if you have to manually for a large text, or if you're going to do the whole canon, it would be very tedious work. So next slide. Yeah, so and Konstantinos is going to talk about how we approached how a workflow to get good quality translation. So part of it is really just training it to be a good philologist, right? So it's the the idea in the end. I mean, the goal will be to translate in at least like one canon. The Zhentong canon would be like a good place to start, but it could do anything. So, but to even like do one text is like the towards the end of the presentation, we'll at least like give one sample of what this is doing now, right? It's just training it to read how we read, right?
Texted the family group chat that his exact.
Okay. So this to take an unpunctuated text, you've got to punctuate the text, and like if you're working from we were working from the Kanripo, right? So the Hanfando Daoist the Zhentong canon. So it's like you don't only have to punctuate it, but you have to like the content of one paragraph will spill over on multiple pages, right? So kind of how to create a paragraph out of the text, and a glossary. So that was like we developed a big glossary to begin with, and as you'll see, the glossary is like keeps like building as we process text. So, and then even after the puts and paragraphs and punctuates it to consistency within the document, and as well as just making sure the how you say the different one term is translated the same across the whole text. Just to double check, right? These are just all things that we do. This is to translate the text manually, and just training training our eating to do this reading process. Konstantinos, do you want to?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Also, from me. So, and thank you for David for hosting, and Elena also. So as Professor Pate said, we try to code the program so that it imitates the philologist steps when translating, and we use Python. Obviously, that's for the automation. And as Professor Pate said, Canrepo was our database for the text, and the intelligence, the human with quotes element comes from the LLM models from OpenAI and Google. That's GPT and Gemini. Python, of course, I'm sure most of you know that it has a lot of libraries that are very useful for text manipulation and parsing. So we're going to do a lot of that. And Canrepo has an API that can be used in the code, so that the program can call directly the repository and download the text. Same with OpenAI and the Gemini models. There's an API that can be used in the code, so that the whole process is automated. Now, the way we approach it is by designing 3 classes. So the program creates 3 objects that govern the whole process, basically. The first one, we call it the segmented text. It represents conceptually our text in all its forms: unpunctuated, punctuated, translated, and it downloads from Canrepo the text that we want, right? But we give it the code. It parses what it gets from Canrepo and creates the title as attributes, right? The title, the text properties, and then a list of the text of the facsimiles, right? not the facsimiles themselves, not the images, but the text, because that's how Canripo has documented this text. And of course, every facsimile has a label, a reference label, right? That is the number and side. It's 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, etc. And then there are placeholders waiting to be filled, and we're gonna see how this happens. So the second object that we create, we call it the prompt gateway. It governs all interactions with the LLM models. So as we will see, we call the models for different jobs, for different functions, for punctuating, for translating. We do double cross-checking, a lot of cross-checking, correction, and also glossary extraction. So every different type of call has its own settings, so that we can fully control the specific job that we assign it, the LLM model to do. And of course, as an object, this gateway manages the serial keys, because when you use the API for these models, you need to have an account and to have your own serial key, and you are also billed. OpenAI and Google bills you. They're not free like ChatGPT. And also the instructions, very important part, and the instructions for each different job. And the settings, we like to think of the settings as a soundboard that you can raise one value, lower another, and so that you can fine-tune the process. And an important part also of the way we designed it is that you can use different models for different jobs. So this is especially important when you want something like cross-checking, which is exponential. The number of cross-checkings you do grows exponential with the number of pages you have. Facsimiles. So you want a cheaper model that is, and maybe a free one, like some of the Gemini models that are free. The third object is the one that governs the workflow, right, where everything comes together. So we attach on it the text and the gateway, and also a glossary. The glossary is not needed technically, but it really makes a difference. So the whole process can take place without, with an empty glossary, but we'll just, have no control. So the way the workflow works is with two loops. The first loop is a punctuation loop. Every iteration of the loop inserts the text of a facsimile and creates a working text. And from this working text, we prompt through the gateway a punctuation. From the punctuation, we always, after every punctuation attempt, we always check for corruption, because this is the model can simply corrupt a character, miss a character, add extra characters. So we really don't want to, alter the original text. Then we create segments. We break the text into paragraphs. Usually the segment typically is a paragraph, but it can be a header, a title, some other unit. Then we reassign labels so that each paragraph, we know each paragraph, each segment, its page and line. So the span, right, of the lines. And then we cross-check each segment with all previous segments for consistency. And if there is an inconsistency, we send it for correction. The second loop is the translation loop. What does it? It iterates through the segments, the punctuated segments. It identifies the glossary needed for translation for the specific segment. This can be done either mechanically, we have an option for mechanically, or it can be sent to the LLM models so that maybe you can give certain instructions for nuance, but it raises the cost. Then you prompt the translation, you cross-check with all previous segments so that you make sure that there is no verbatim phrase that is translated differently. And lastly, you prompt it to extract glossary and you update your glossary with the extracted glossary. So if we see, and at the end, of course, you can export. As of now, we can export just a Word document, but theoretically, you can export to anything you want. You just need to write the code. How this looks now, if we follow the text transformation. So you have here the text from the facsimiles, right? Let's two facsimiles. The program does, it takes them and removes the border so that the model does not see the borders and is biased. So you have this continuous text. From the working text, we send the working text for punctuation, and we also divide it into segments. And the last segment, we keep it as a leftover to be added to the next working text that we will form for the next iteration in the loop. Then we reassign the labels, right? So that each segment, we know exactly where it is. We cross-check then. The cross-checking, you basically send to the model unpunctuated segment and punctuated segment A and B, segments A and segment B, and you ask if there are inconsistencies. And then when we go to the translation loop, as I said, we iterate segment by segment. We send the segment, or we do it mechanically, or we send it to the LLM. It selects possible glossary terms that will be useful for the translation. Then we find some of them, whatever we have in the glossary, and we give the terms we found in glossary plus some previous segments for context and the segment to be translated. We give all this as a prompt for translation, and on the right is the translation. Then we cross-check and the translation with all previous translations, all previous segments, and basically that's the gist of the process. Of course, there are more moving parts behind the backstage. Yes, and at the end we update the glossary. That's very important, so that if the same term or phrase appears later in the text, we can translate it the same way. The program translates the same way. And at the end, we export, and it looks something like that as a Word document. I'll pass now back to Professor Petit. Oh, you're muted, Professor.
Thank you. Sorry, I was talking to nobody. In the chat, I put the link to the document on the previous slide. So I guess the example that you can look in the doc, it's unadulterated and it's not perfect, but it's at least thinking of a way to give a readable or a starting place. So, and like I think moving forward, it's like we've only just done this one text, and as we go, the glossary will develop, and like and we're hoping to find collaborators or somebody with a lot of money that can like do one text could have its own kind of special glossary if somebody went through to like code it, and if you have like 1,000 people working on it, the better, right? It's but it's there are it's not intended to be like a perfect or something that you can publish, but it would be, we could the Zhentong Daoist canon, you can toss in the extended ones, and the Egon Dao canon or whatever, we could just like at least as build a repository and just at least give a translation that would be a good place to begin. And next slide. Yeah, so I mean, there's like a lot of, as Constantino said, a lot of moving parts to this project. So kind of each one of these are, I guess, like could really develop more or hone in on, if like you had a team of 10 people and each person like or however it works, right? It's just, there are a lot of ways to refine it and make it better. It's just like so if you're looking through the translation now, it's like there are definite ways that we can build this and things to develop. So. Next slide. Yeah, I mean, maybe this is all like somewhat obvious, but it's the abuses or the potential thing would be to maybe de-incentivizes people to learn the original text, but I don't think that will actually happen. And it could, to me, I think like giving a place to begin, or and the translation is ongoing, like refined too, right? It's like so that even students can play a role in like making the translation better, or so I think it's like the potential like uses of it outweigh any kind of misuses of it. I'd hate if people like started to cite it as like, well, the eating's like but maybe in certain contexts it could be, or it could be a kind of publication system where one person really, or a team of people really like take control of a certain translation. So maybe someday it can be cited, but at least at this point we're not like trying to give a citable translation just to a really good first step to think about a text that hasn't been studied, because there's so many of them, right? So maybe it's like next slide. So I mean, it's like we know that like we know the technology is there to like build an online community and have the text, and it's like but it will take money, or it will take time or treasure, right? If people are like interested to help us, like that's great. Is to to build something is like possible, but it's just at this point we're kind of in need of time or treasure. So I think we're about out of time. Mahalo nui loa. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Konstantinos. Let's save our questions till the end, till after all the presentations. I'm sure this is generating some good questions and important questions. So let's move on to our next presentation by Daniel Patrick Morgan and Johan Roll, so CRCAO, Centre de Recherche sur les civilisations de l'Asie orientale. My apologies to French speakers for mangling your language. They will talk to us, introduce to us really, Didact, the digital investigation of the Duren Jing and its commentarial tradition. So Daniel and Johan, take it away.
Yes. Hello. So Yuan probably needs no introduction because he's a Daoist scholar. I am not. I'm a historian of science with an interest in commentary. I taught myself how to code in 2020, and I play around with digital humanities. The last year, the two of us began to read Chen Zhishu's commentary to the Duren Jing, the DZ91. So for background, the Duren Jing, the Scripture of Salvation, was written around 400 in the Lingbao tradition. It's the first scripture after the Lao Tzu to have inspired an exegetical tradition, and its prestige was such that the one-volume scripture was expanded to 61 volumes under the Song. Chen Zhishu, on the other hand, he's a 14th century scholar. He's a student of Zhao Youqin. He studied inner alchemy and the sciences, and his commentary on this religious scripture features contents on scientific cosmology and mathematical astronomy, which is how Yuan tricked me into reading it. We had some preliminary questions about the text due to our unfamiliarity, well, especially my unfamiliarity with period, corpus, and discipline. And the sciencey passages in this commentary, sorry, the question is, are the sciencey passages in the commentary representative of this work, of Chen Zhishu's oeuvre, of other scholarly or religious commentators, or of the typical reading of the passages in the Duren Jing in question in other commentaries? How do we gather, organize, and navigate the relationships between cited sources? Is it our commentator who's speaking, or is he simply recycling from his predecessors at a given point in the commentary? And among the different transmitted and rediscovered versions of the base text, which one is, quote, the base text? These are all really traditional questions, but as I'm an outsider to Daoist studies, I suggested that we use digital methods to cut corners. We call the project Didact on the bottom here, digital investigation into the Duren Jing and its commentarial traditions. In short, what we're doing is built on an infrastructure for XML tagging and data extraction inspired by Marcus, which I call Norbert or Norbert in French. It's private. I'm not really here to talk about Norbert, but you can check out my date converter, which I might show you later, to get a sense of how the larger infrastructure works. Okay. This is our work plan. I think we began working in June or May or something of last year. I forget. What we finished is in green, and as you can see, we are still laying the foundations. We are not at all done with the first step of this project. So we've settled on ontologies, definitions, and data structure for the XML. We've selected a corpus of 13 versions of the base text with 17 commentaries. We've converted them to XML and split the text into commentary, base text, paratext, etc. We ran these through Norbert to tag, to identify names, dates, works, and so on. And we've begun the work of disambiguating the entities to which the names and titles in the text refer in a relational database. For the moment, we're planning to do all of this to get to text reuse and citation network analysis. That's the goal. We're not there yet. Before we get there, we need to finish disambiguating entities and work out an absolute or relative chronology of people and works, and indeed work out whether that is even feasible to do. Yuan wanted me to say a word about disambiguation, and he's making...
Sur le côté.
What's up?
On ne voit pas sur le côté, tu vois, il y a tout l'intervenant là. Et
Yeah.
on voit pas la partie sur le côté.
Oh, okay. Ah, okay. Yuan also wants me to make the slides smaller. Oh, you know what? I can just hide that, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. All right. So in addition to helping me make the presentation readable, Yuan wanted me to say a word about disambiguation. So the relations between people, names, works, and other people are to be, if they're to be extracted into a relational database so that we can ask questions about the relationship between people and works, independent of how those things are called, then we have to do what we call disambiguation. I mainly work on histories, and it should come as no surprise, we encountered a serious problem in Daoist text with divinities and immortals. There are 10 times more of those things than there are of people, at least in the text we've been looking at. The one person, many names, one name, many people problem is much worse with divinities and immortals. These things do not obey the same principles of, say, only living in one place and time. They are different types of non-humans, including those who used to be historical people. And there's a conflation between titles, physical offices, and persons. And not every text seems to agree on to whom and to what a particular name refers. You have to define these as you would mathematical constants to properly extract and use them from text, but gods, immortals, and the Tao are often hard to pin down. Yuan has the idea that we can potentially include divinities in a database, but our policy at this stage is simply to distinguish divinities from people and to exclude divinities wholesale from short-term disambiguation and analysis. Okay. So while we're waiting on trying to figure out a chronology between texts and people and whether that's even possible to discuss the direction of citation, again, if that's possible, I've begun to write some test code for the analysis phase of our project, doing this also in Python. And we presume that that's what the audience would want to see. So quickly, we got an unexpected answer as concerns the mathematical contents in these commentaries to the Duren Jing, which is in short that Chen Zhishu is not the only exegete to appeal to astronomical data. So basically, we're astronomical data is usually numbers followed by units of measure that only occur in the context of astronomy, and that's easy enough to find in the text. And we can pull out from what paragraph in a particular commentary those things appear, and then in relation to what passage of the base text those commentarial passages are. So Chen Zhishu, he's not the only commentator to go into this subject. And while most commentaries in green overlap on one of the base text passages in pink. So there's one passage of the Duren Jing where everybody brings in this discipline. He and others also insert the discipline elsewhere in the text as well in their commentaries. Why? Well, with this diagram, we can go back and focus on this small handful of passages in the base text and commentaries there too, to understand each exegete's coverage and choice of where to insert the topic of mathematical astronomy. Likewise, and equally quickly, we mapped the proportion of characters that each commentary devotes to each paragraph of the base text. This provides us with a sort of histogram of relative level of attention, and each commentary's histogram is distinct in terms of balance and centers of attention. So what we're looking at is percentage of the commentary devoted to section of the base text as normalized for how much of the base text that section represents. We're not entirely sure what's going on with the really big differences in centers of attention and in the variation in how much more attention is given to one passage over another between these commentaries. But here again, we plan to use these histograms as maps to pinpoint differences in exegetical approaches through traditional methods. Next, the main reason that we're cautious on this last point is because much of each commentary comprises explicit quotes of earlier sources. It's unclear where those quotes end. We know where they begin. And likewise, what unattributed text might be recycled from elsewhere. It's a little difficult, therefore, to pinpoint the commentator's voice amid all of the sources that he is explicitly or unexplicitly citing. To untangle the commentator and his sources, I wrote an exploratory script that generates a statistical report on each text. On the one hand, it extracts explicit citations. This will only become interesting, however, once we finished disambiguating people and other works, because for the moment we have a lot of duplicata. And on the other hand, the script identifies uncited borrowings and where quotations end. I performed an n-gram analysis across the Daoist canon to find parallels in our texts, and then that gives you a really clear idea of where each citation actually ends. And an n-gram analysis is what you do is you take you slice up text into like windows of a given length, and then you find how many of those windows match between two texts. So you can, you're not looking for a perfect match, but you're looking for a kind of fuzzy, near perfect match. And then you can, that's quantifiable, so you can sort things by how close matches are. Anyways, the goal is the goal is to eventually look at citation networks, but we made an interesting observation at this stage. Namely, in looking for parallels, we can, one byproduct of that is we can very easily do a kind of track changes comparison between explicit and unexplicit citations, between the commentaries we're reading and their potential sources. And we discover that where they're like citing other commentaries that we have, they cut and modify the cited text quite a bit, which is to me quite interesting because we don't really do that in the commentarial traditions that I work on. And we can compare, therefore, quotation habits in these texts with other exegetical traditions in this regard. All right, so we're really only at the beginning of this project, and our initial results still concern preliminary questions concerning the nature of the Duren jing and its commentarial tradition, the place of the sciences therein, its sources, and commentators' citation habits. These are old-fashioned questions that we could have addressed the old-fashioned way. Digital tools simply allowed us to go faster, to have an overview and see things we might have missed. Takes a few seconds to scan thousands of texts in the Daoist canon for parallel passages, and every question we formulate in computer language can be asked everywhere in a loop without bias across a quantity of sources that we could never read alone. Moreover, the language and mentality of computing are so different from ours or from a traditional philological approach that we can't ask the same questions in the same way. Generally, we have to be more precise, start from a different angle, leave margins for errors and whatnot. So that's interesting exercise in philology and historiography. Lastly, I'll mention that DINACT is part of a programme de recherche, or I guess working group in English, that we have at the CRCAO called Citation. The objective of which is to study citation practices and textual reuse in commentary and encyclopedias, with a certain focus on science, religion, and obviously digital humanities. We've just launched, and we've begun organizing workshops and exchanges for the year on course. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you very much, Jean. Okay, on to our final presentation here. Next is Vincent Gousset of École Pratique des Hautes Études in Paris, and he will speak on the CRTA.info. That's the Chinese Religious Text Authority database and its uses for exploring Daoist texts. Vincent.
Thank you very much, David. So before I begin, one word about technicality. My connection here happens to be very bad today for a reason I really can't understand at all. It crashed just before, so I hope it doesn't crash when I present, but if it does, I'll try to reconnect. But apologies in advance if it doesn't work. I have no idea what's happening, but things happen. Okay, let me share my screen. And here, okay, do you, whoops.
Yes. Oh.
Yep. Okay, things really weird are happening on my computer, but okay. You have it full screen now? Hopefully, yes.
Yes, we have.
Okay. So I'm very grateful to the Global Daoist Studies Forum to give me this opportunity to present this project and recent development. I have already had opportunities to present earlier stages of the project in other places, and maybe you've heard some of this before, but hopefully there will be some interesting new developments. So compared to the two projects we just heard about, which are really impressive and using AI, among other technologies, to do things with Daoist text that we couldn't do before. This CRTA is, in fact, rather low tech as far as the digital tools are concerned, but I think it can contribute to the overall development in digital humanities by providing rather large, reliable, and easily accessible and usable data, and more specifically metadata about the Daoist text that we're all interested in. So very briefly, what CRTA is and isn't. It's a completely Wikimedia technology-based, open access online site. So one need a user account to actually add and modify data, but not read the data. The whole data set is completely open access, and you can actually download it with one click and then play with it and transform it to whatever format and for whatever purpose you want to put it to. So far, it's basically pages describing editions of religious text, not only Daoist text, but I will focus a little bit more on Daoist text here today. But it includes all kinds of religious texts in a wider sense. And so it's descriptions of the text, where they were published, how the content, so on and so forth. So we don't provide so far image files or text file, but we are just at the beginning of a new development where we are going to OCR a large subset of the whole collections that we described. And so we'll be providing good quality searchable text file hopefully in the near future. So at the present, so what we have is about 6,000 pages, and each page is a description of one given edition, not a given text, right? But a given edition for famous texts, and I'm going to mention a few examples in a moment, like Dao De Jing or Tai Shan Gading Pian or Duren Jing for that matter, which have lots of different editions. Each edition has its own description, and one of the things we can do with CRTA is to very quickly compare the different editions of a given text you're interested in. So I won't go. Maybe I will go very quickly over the history of the project. Started in a winter school in residence in a mountain retreat, and then it went online in 21. And then at the same time, as and I say we, it's managed by a steering committee with a number of persons in Europe, North America, and East Asia, including Catherine Alexander, University of Colorado in Boulder, Gregory Scott, Manchester, UK, Philip Clark, Leipzig, Germany, Cao Xinyu, Zhenmin Daxue, Beijing, Marcus Bingenheimer, of course, Temple University, Philadelphia, and a few other colleagues we are all working with on a very regular basis. But at the same time as we develop the database, we also train young scholars to read the various sorts of texts that we describe in the database, both through online webinars and workshops, and sometimes in residence. So we have had several winter schools here in Paris, and we have also benefited from a French-German grant that allowed us to do more. Contribute more data to the database and also do research with it. Okay, so we don't work with a clear definition of what kind of religious text we want to include or not, but we set priorities for the kind of collections of editions we want to describe as a priority, and we've been mostly starting with the vast recent reprint collections. That have been published in mainland China and Taiwan and other places over the last 20 years or so. And we are also now starting to work with the digitized editions, all by various libraries across the world, that they put online for us to use, and that actually few people use because we don't have a map to this vast new continent of editions. We can also host individual projects on more focused corpora and collections of text, for instance, gathered through fieldwork or through intensive research in particular public or private collections. So we don't have so many texts on Muslims and Christian collections so far. There are other, of course, digital tools for those collections, but the ultimate aim of the project is to integrate all of this. So far, as of today, we have about 32 reprint collections, so over 3,000 different editions. There are each of them with their own page and description. Library collections, we have fewer editions, but it's growing by the day, and also some research collections, as you can see, over 2,000 different pages, the largest part of which is Gregory Scott's own collection on Buddhist books. Right, so the idea is to map all of these and provide a tool for scholars who work on religion, but not only religion, because there are many historians of Chinese culture or literature or politics or economics or whatever, who would benefit from getting access to some of the religious texts that discuss the same topics they're interested in, but they don't go into this sort of resources because they don't have a map to navigate this vast literature, and CRTA hopefully will serve them as a map for going into religious texts and finding passages and elements that might be useful for their own research questions. Okay. So Daoist collections. So what we've been doing so far, and that's the sort of update I wanted to share with everyone here today, is that over the last few months, we have mostly completed the description that is describing each and every edition in the given reprint collections for many collections that are explicitly devoted to Daoist text, even though their contents might be very mixed. And of course, there are many texts that we would consider, or some of us would consider Daoist, also included in other collections of text that do not necessarily call themselves Daojiao. Right, so this is a short list. Of course, the Daozhong Jiao, Daozhong Jinghua Lu, it's early Republican period, and then the Taiwanese Daozhong Jinghua, recent collections of Daoist gazetteers, Zhanghuai Daoshu, of course, the Taiwanese Zhonghua Xu Daozhang, the collections of Guandi text in a vast series of collections called Daozhong Jicheng, published in Beijing, the Shandong Shui, and all of this amounts to almost 2,000 different editions, and all of them are described here, right? So with the obvious question some of you may have in mind is, where's the Daozong there? Well, because most scholars are more familiar and they are better tools for exploring and mapping the Daozong. So we have not done this as a priority, but we have a page for Daozong, and we are starting to document, to create a page for each and every of the 5,000 or so text in the Daozong, right? So we are doing this now, and of course cross-referencing, because one of the interesting questions with that is how many texts in the Daozong also have separate different editions elsewhere, and how many don't. Are unique to the Daozong, and that's something. And when we have completed creating all the pages for the Daozong text, that's a question we'll be able to answer in just a few clicks. All right. So to give you an example of what it looks like, and of course, I mean, some of you have been using CRTA and you're familiar with that, but just to an example that one of our hosts, Elena Valusi, has worked and published about, one of the Luzu, the Ludongbin collections here, as included in a Taiwanese reprint collection, Zhonghua Daozong, and you can see that you have general information and an image of a representative page, and then the contents. And of course, contents are useful because many texts are never, important texts are never published as a book, so they don't appear in catalog because they are not book titles, but they circulate within books. Right, they are reprinted and including all kinds of anthologies and other books. So it's very important to be able to have comprehensive mulu, table of contents of those collections, and through that to be able to trace the circulation and the history of certain text, right? So the mulu here on the right, and then you have commentaries including bibliography, like if someone like Elena has published something on that text, then we try to mention that. And of course, we link to the full text when it's available somewhere. In that case, Wikimedia Commons, but it can be Internet Archive, it can be all kinds of online resources. Right, and also we point to other pages that are closely related within CRTA. Sometimes it's a different edition or reprint of the same text or closely related text. And so that allows for quickly understanding which are the most interesting editions of a given text you want to study. A few more words, if I have a few 5 more minutes, to mention something I've been doing with CRTA very recently, and it's really much work in progress, but I think it shows the kind of things that this resource allows us to do, is to try to quantify this vast landscape of religious text. This is not what CRTA was built for. It's a research tool for all kinds of research purposes, but it can also help us doing quantitative research, right? So at the moment, about 6,000 different editions, not counting, I mean, I call redirect, when one same edition is the same copy is actually reprinted in 2 different collections. That happens quite a lot. Then, of course, we don't count that as separate pages, right? There are probably over, that's a wild estimate, educated guess, if you want to call it that, over 20,000 editions that are readily available, right, reprinted in our libraries or online, that we are aimed to describe, right? So we are, we're walking our way, but there's much more to be done. So any quantitative analysis or assessment of this collection is very it's not definitive, right? But it's already I think we are past a sort of a critical mass where we can begin to say some things about this larger landscape of religious texts that we have access to. And of course, there are all kinds of bias, selection bias in the text that have been made available to us in either reprint collections or digitized library repositories. And we know that certain types of texts, such as manuscripts or concertina, I mean, Jing editions have not been as much included in those collections than other more beautiful high-end editions. So there are all kinds of biases, but still. So it's of course mostly for the Ming, Qing, early Mingguo period, mostly woodblocks, but of course we see lithographs and then mechanical press, movable type editions appearing from the very late 19th century onwards. Still a significant number of manuscripts, which shows that the vitality of manuscript culture in the middle of this vibrant print culture within the world of religious text production and circulation in late medieval times. We can do analysis by types of publisher. This is a little bit more complex because for each publisher, we have to find out whether it's a private, like family press, or a commercial press, or a religious press, or a spread writing hall, or maybe a monastic press in some cases. So we are working on this. We can do geographical analysis and also historical development, see what kind of texts were printed in what kind of place, by what kind of institution, during what kind of time periods. And of course, the genres. So this is, and we have CRT as research tools that allows us to quickly create corpora for religious texts printed in a given place. So this is an example of a screenshot when you search for text published in Beijing, then you get a whole list sorted by time period. This is a quick geographical analysis of the corpus of over 3,000 editions, for which we have a good indication of where it was printed or copied. Here, so of course, we can see the overwhelming importance of the Jiangnan region in publishing religious texts, and of course, this also differs by time period, but nonetheless. So I'm just showing you this quickly to give you an idea of the kind of things we can do with the data when we want to play with it and ask some types of questions. I'm not going to comment on this. We can get back to it during Q&A if you like. Time period, so we can do like this sort of historical charts. Here, and of course, we see how production, the text, not exactly the text that were printed, but the texts that have survived and have been made available to us. The numbers really take off just after the end of the typing war, for rather obvious reasons, but we also see how the late Ming actually produced more extant editions than the High Qing, which is an interesting fact by itself. So here you can see when you want to do a closer analysis of what happened during and just after the typing war up until the early years of the Republican period, right? You see certain moments of higher and lower textual production. We can do analysis by contents, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to read and comment this, but I've come up with a very general typology in 12 types. So this is very rough, but it allows us to do some very general estimation of the type of text that were produced, and we can also again sort that by regional or time period. You can see here the importance of the Baojuan, the precious volumes, morality books, scriptures, jing, and a self-cultivation book, which are the four major types here. We can do finer analysis by adding a tag to each page for whichever category one wants to create. And that, for instance, we can tag the kind of illustration that different editions have. We can tag gods, and that's a major next stage of the project is identifying and tagging all the gods mentioned or talking for themselves in the case of Revelation. In those texts, you can tag a religious tradition, right? If you're interested in, for instance, Jing Daoism or Shenzhen Daoism or Iguan Dao or whatever, you can find all the texts that are related to that tradition here or specific genres, right? We can also ask questions like, what were the most popular books, using the number of editions as a proxy to this. And you can see here some numbers for some particularly influential Daoist text here. So we can see the importance of the Taishan Ganin Tian by the number of editions. Daojing, of course, the Mingshan Jing, which would not necessarily jump to mind as if you ask Daoist scholars, what is the most popular Daoist text, but which is one of the most widely printed texts in 19th and 20th century China. So we are use the CRTA data with Lan Yongyang, with a postdoctoral scholar in the French-German research project I mentioned earlier. So we created within CRTA a corpus of Taishan Ganinkan editions, and we analyzed it. Here we have a chart of the historical evolution of the printing, not writing commentaries, but the printing of the Taishan Ganinkan editions over time, and that's part of a forthcoming article about this, analyzing 124 editions, all documented within CRTA, right? So that's kind of things you can do with the CRTA data, is really do the history of a given text. And that's my last part of this presentation. Another focus study using CRTA data I'm doing at the moment is looking in particular at spirit writing and the text produced through spirit writing. So extracting from the CRTA data, and that's very much work in progress. The numbers are growing by the day again, but for the moment I have about 350 spirit-written books and 575 different spirit-writing groups that produced and published those books, right? And so we can analyze how these groups were the type of spirit-written books they published in different places, in different time periods. And this is just an example here, mapping, well, among this 170, some of them are not well located, but for those who have a very precise location, we can map them, onto China. And that's a kind of thing you can do, trying to understand the geographical extent. And of course, we can do a time lapse maps of this, seeing how spirit writing groups appear in different regions in different periods and develop. But that's the overall map of all the active spirit written halls between the Song and the Republican period. Okay, and that's the timeline of the publication, right? So this allows us to get a wider picture. I mean, beyond the Daozong, the Daozong Diao, and the better known major Daoist canons, beyond Shanghai and its well-known Buddhist presses, to get a sense of how smaller but still important regional printing centers and institutions publish different kinds of text, Daoist or otherwise. And as I was saying before, we are also now trying to provide much more detailed and systematic data on the gods present in those texts. And I'll end up here, stop share, and hand it back to David. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vincent, very much. Thank you all for these really rich and informative presentations. I feel like our fields are just changing by the day, even by the hour. So I imagine that many questions are emerging at this point. So you can do one of two things. You can either use the raise hand tool to raise your hand digitally. Actually, let's just do that because there's a lot of people. So if you have a question, use the raise hand tool to raise your hand and I'll call on you. Or you can also type into the chat, although it's a bit easier if we do it verbally, but if you prefer to type, I'll pay attention. So the floor is open for questions to any of our presenters.
Vincent, did you see the chat?
Okay. Here we have it. I'll read it, Vincent. There's a chat from Edward W. Dr. Gousset, I have been a reader of your books for many years and I have admired it greatly. May I ask if there's any way I can contribute to CRTA as a member of the public? I have several old Chinese religious books in my private collection. I'd like to contribute them. Vincent, do you have a response?
Thank you very much, Edward. So basically contributing. there are two ways. If you have something to say about a given edition or a given book, or while using research purposes, you come across a mistake or you want to add something. The easiest is just email me or any other member of the steering committee, and we're going to set up a generic address as well. But anyway, reach out to us, and we'll be happy to enter the data and credit you if you like. You don't have to be credited normally, but if you want to, we are very happy to credit you. Now, if you want to really contribute a very substantial amount of data on a whole collection, then we can create an account for you, and we'll spend maybe an hour or two online through Zoom explaining the data format, because, well, it's not very complicated, but still, one need to understand the kind of, well, the data has a specific format, otherwise they don't appear. It's not really useful for users. And also one more thing, we describe texts that are available. So if you have manuscript and they are not available anywhere else than in your own private study, we don't think it's very useful to describe them, because people won't be able to access them. So what we would encourage people, if they have a private collection, is to scan them and upload them somewhere, such as Internet Archive, and then we can describe them. Sorry.
Okay, Mike, we have a queue now. Michael Stanley Baker and then Jennifer Eichmann. Michael, why don't you go first? Can you ask your question out loud, Michael?
This is a question for Jeep, just about translations and whether are you training the AI or cross-checking against existing translations, and what are the problems and advantages of that?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question, and Konstantinos can chime in as well. But it's
so I can chime in, as you said. So we are not training an LLM model. What we created is a pipeline that uses pre-trained models, GPT and Gemini, and potentially we can change the code to include any LLM model that has an API. So we don't train models like, as the technical term, training, with machine learning. That's not what we do. We use the pre-trained models in a pipeline. And that's because, of course, GPT, the latest GPT 5.2 and Gemini 3, they are, I don't know, they're unsurpassable. They exceed on most of, they exceed against most LLM models, and they can also be used for different jobs. They have a spectrum of a large spectrum of capabilities. But what we do is we use a glossary that is taken from Professor Petit's translation. So the glossary extraction part, this tool that we use in the architecture, we apply it to Professor Petit's translation. So we took.
I mean, like, that's just the bias, I guess, and that's like when I mentioned that each, collaborators could come in and there's ways that we could develop glossaries specific to text, and certainly, like the kind of translation that I put in is, from a certain period, and there's going to be like biases in that way, but yeah, it's the goal will be to just bring everybody into, like, as a committee to develop the glossary, I guess, is, so there are certain biases that will translate certain texts better than others, or anyway, we better.
And there are some ethical issues also with using existing translations. I mean, I don't know what the copyright issues, that are now being discussed with AI. But this is, we can just, start training models with other people's translations. It raises question. I don't know what the ethics are about this, but it raises questions.
Cool, thanks.
Jennifer Eichmann.
Thank you for 3 very, very rich talks. My question is for Jonathan and Constantino. I think your project raises a lot of questions. One, about whose translations dominate, whose translations are accepted as the best or a standard, and then what that means in terms of how you translate the next set of texts, and whether, because if we think about texts and commentaries and the way people read them, terms might have different meanings in different time periods, or there might be people who were really pushing against one kind of translation, and that might also be true in terms of modern scholarship. And so I'm wondering how you account for that sort of thing, and how you account for the way that language changes over, say, a 19th century translation in British English versus a 2026 translation in modern American English. And just those kinds of questions. I wondered if you could talk about that.
Those are all excellent questions. Yeah, I mean, right now it's like Konstantinos and I are working in our own little cave or whatever, right? It's like we're the kind of what we can do with the 2 of us is very little, but I think if lots of different people use this to mark up like texts of different periods, like using different people's expertise to come together as a team. And collaboratively try to think about maybe like how a certain term evolves over time, and how you could a time-sensitive translation or even in a specific period kind of what it's from, like maybe translation strategies, like you could get as detailed as you want, right? There'd be like ways to maybe use this tool for a team of people to come together and kind of like think about the translation of a particular text. And so I've would hope that, I mean, if it's just like the 2 of us in our little cave, then it probably will just reflect what the 2 of us, right? It's like so I would kind of hope if it's something that people want to be done, that like it could bring people together and answer some of those questions. If it's just the 2 of us, then it will be kind of a very limited conversation.
Konstantinos, anything to add to that?
No, I don't have anything to add. Maybe that the idea of different periods, again, you will need to add an extra layer there in the architecture to identify the period, or you define the period, and then you maybe use a certain glossary. So that is possible. Just needs let's say an intention, like of I want to do this. Well, then writing the code is not that big of a deal, but the intention, the plan, right, is the what needs to be there.
Okay, thank you. Just quickly, Edward W., if you look in the chat, just mentions a comment here that practitioners from Singapore, Chinese-speaking practitioners from Singapore and Malaysia, among other places, are right now using AI to translate. So it's an interesting note here. Daniel Morgan has a question. Daniel, do you want to raise this verbally, please?
Yeah, but they did all the effort typing it.
Yeah, well,
yes. I'll do that.
Both media are great. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I've had the kind of weird experience of starting a very traditional translation project a number of years ago, and then now it's become a like evaluative, interactive tool that makes no sense to publish in paper or in PDF, and whose home will probably be on GitHub or as a web app. That will feed like an analytical monograph. And I'm maybe not the only person to run into this problem, but certainly as these tools develop, like I think the role of translation is going to be really different in sinology, as that was kind of like the bedrock of what we did for a long time. So I'm curious if Konstantinos and Jonathan, if you guys have any sort of sense of where translation is heading, what that will look like in the future for us.
Yeah, it's I hope in a better place. I feel very like invigorated and excited of how these tools enable like a more nuanced translation. I think it's a so it's a yeah, I think the prospects are good that our translations will be better, right? But yeah, certainly it's like a I mean, kind of the idea of this tool, right, is providing at least an entry point for people to, you know, kind of a semi-reliable is just like a first step in the process, and translating will always remain like a reflective of a certain kind of mental process as you try to interpret the text, right? And just because something has like an AI generated rough like a stab at like how to organize a text, that it still forces us to do the old fashioned sweat and blood with like trying to understand it, right? So it's yeah, maybe on the surface it won't change at all, but underneath it's like the tools at our disposal are vastly different.
Do you still see yourself publishing a monograph that is a translation of a work?
No, I mean like it's like but yeah, at the same time, yes, because you can like you know, you can still, I don't know, like build knowledge through translation. But yeah, me personally, I definitely probably not. I think people still can, and so I don't think it's just because these tools exist doesn't mean that like someone's translation is like still a reflection of their own, you know, cognitive like approach to understanding the text. I don't know.
May I add? May I add also that a translation is also, beside an academic work, is a work of art, right? It's a literary work and has literary value. So I don't think AI can really replace the human translator. Actually, it can replace, but I don't think it's gonna be good quality. You always need the human to check that everything's okay, to review, but also to sometimes, you know, just write the translation because you have a vision. The translator has a vision of, well, I want to do this translation this way. And there are different styles of translation, of course. So I really think it's human translators are not going away.
Good. Well put.
Jean Rolls, do you want to voice your comment?
Yeah, so it's more question. It's just interesting if you see about the possibility to use a Buddhist text translation tool. I know like Dharma Mitra, so they are using Gemini AI, and if so, if you compare your translation with their translation for the Taoist text.
Yeah, good question. And no, we had no, not yet. But definitely, it's that has inspired us in many ways, right? I mean, I think what we're just even the possibility of what we're working on was in part shaped by that project. So it's both foundational and at the same time, like we haven't. It's all pretty new. I mean, just the translation we just did is like from yesterday. It's just like it's very. Like first step. But that's like we'd like to, like, you know, even publish a paper just to kind of explain what we've done, and definitely that would be something that would need, you know, need to put it in the context of everything that's out there, and you know, even to reuse it.
Okay, if you look in the chat, B. Bidlack has a short comment saying he sees this as more positively a step towards deeper philology and cross-textual analysis. That's the thing, cross-textual analysis, just wider, quicker. And that's a hope here, it seems. Elena has a hand raised. Elena.
Yeah, thank you. Great presentations. And yes, I do agree that our field is progressing by leaps and bounds. But my question for everybody is, and maybe for the first two presentations more, is how do you, because this is, Daoist Studies Forum, but really your projects are similar and have similar problems to other projects that don't have anything to do with Daoist studies or even with sinology. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about how your experience, or you have been inspired by other projects within sinology, for example, Marcus, or other projects that have dealt with similar problematics, and if you have found collaboration with them, or if you've found similar problems, or you think that Daoist studies is, completely divorced from other sinological or even non-sinological projects of the kind. So if you can kind of expand a little more beyond Daoist studies.
Daniel, Johan, you want to go first?
Okay. Well, okay, so I'm primarily a historian of science, and I work a lot on like Confucian type people. And one thing that is unique about Taoist texts and Buddhist texts in looking at because I was very inspired by Marcus Bingenheimer when I first got started, is that you have like divinities and stuff like that who are basically people, but they're people who like show up in different times and places. And so when you are defining when you're defining ontologies for like social network analysis, they screw everything up, because Lao Tzu will appear and meet, some Tang emperor, and he'll appear and meet someone 600 years earlier and whatnot, and that screws up all the networks. So you have to like make really clear distinctions between what sorts of entities are, and we don't have those so much in other sources. In Taoist texts are, for me, as a total outsider, they are a complete mess in terms of chronology. I seriously doubt that Yuan can correct me, that we'll be able to determine things like, is this person before this person, just on that level, let alone like dating texts. Which makes questions of borrowing not impossible, but it makes them undirected. So you can't really say what direction something is going in. That's what comes to mind for me first.
Okay. Jennifer is asking a question of the second presentation. Jennifer, do you want to state this for us?
Sure. It's also for Daniel David Morgan. Could you say more about the project? You just briefly mentioned a project you're working on with citation, a circulation of text, the study of citation and reuse. And I just wonder if you could say more about that project, and then if that project, is it just on Asia, or is it a European project, and then what could it do for the rest of us? Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, this is a category of thing that probably only exists in France. A programme de recherche is basically a kind of like a club that allows us to organize talks and workshops and stuff like that. So that's what we have, and we'll be holding some workshops. There are three of us. So there's me, Yuan, and Mary Bizet-Lilig. Mary Bizet-Lilig, she's very involved in digital humanities. She works on the jing And one of the things that she's interested in is botanical and pharmaceutical, I think, knowledge in Jing commentary. The program, we will be inviting people who are sinologists and also Japanologists. It's a transversal program. First of all, sorry, that's probably less exciting than what you know, a 5 million euro ERC grant or something. But what you can look forward to coming out of that is sinologists talking to Japanologists and producing a couple of edited volumes or what do you call it in English? Special issues of journals. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I really do look forward to that. That would be fantastic.
Okay, I'm going to use my position here to ask a question of Vincent. Vincent, yesterday I was talking to a student here in Cambridge working on medical texts from the 30s that are strewn with all kinds of quotations. And the student wanted to figure out if those quotations, where they were coming from. I mean, some were, of course, from well-known canonical texts. But what if they were coming from the kinds of texts that CERTA is cataloging? How might that person go about then tracking down those allusions if CERTA is providing metadata rather than searchable, you know, whole kind of text searchable function? What advice would you give that student?
Yeah, as I was saying, we are just at the beginning of the new stage where we're produce authored searchable versions for the text we described. But some of the texts we described are there are searchable text editions out there on the internet and very scattered. So the basic idea of CRTA is to provide a map for this. If you're working with a medical text, you found a quotation in a given text called shama, and you find it in CRTA. And then you can get a sense of what it is. What is the context, what's the history of that text, when it appeared, whether it's related to a given religious tradition or whatever. And that's when you're doing medical history, you may not be familiar. I mean, if you find out, okay, that's a Xiantian Dao text, okay, what is Xiantian Dao? And here you can get a context for that quotation. So the use is for, once you found a reference, you know that your quotation comes from such a text, then you get a sense of what that text is and relate it to other texts and other editions of the same text, and so on and so forth. So far, it's not so much for answering the primary question of your students, right? It's finding where the quotation come from. But once you found the quotation, to understand what is the source of the quotation all about.
Yeah, so sort of like reading around
that's
it
going to
in a way,
change when we put out more searchable version of those texts.
All right, thank you very much. Daniel, you had a second question about local LLMs. Was that addressed? I wasn't quite sure. Or do you want to raise it?
Konstantinos?
Yes. So we didn't run a local LLM.
Wait. First, can we hold on, Konstantinos? Can we,
yes.
Daniel? Can you frame the question for us so we know what you're talking about?
Yeah, I don't work much on AI, so I apologize for my ignorance. Most AIs, like ChatGPT and Gemini, they have API access, which is where the computer talks to their server directly, quickly, and then gets a response that it interprets. And whatever your payment plan is, they pay by the token that you send over the API. And I assume it's quite expensive. It is, however, possible to run local LLMs even on a pretty simple computer nowadays. So I was curious if you guys had experimented with that, or if the API calls are not cost prohibitive. And then just to throw out a complete wild card. So I am, because this is the year where I'm doing random things that have nothing to do with what I should be doing. I'm building a Japanese input method with a colleague, and in learning how input methods work, it kind of changed my paradigm on a couple of things. So when like the IME is trying to rank the different candidates for what you've typed, the really clever ones, what they do is they have a really basic, it's not even LLM, it's just like a deep learning model. It's like a mini LM. And it's not operating on the text itself. What it's doing is it's passing judgment on like kind of multiple choice questions that are being passed to it. And in that model, you know, it's not an LLM, but you could put an LLM there to do that. And if you're just giving it multiple choice questions for a process that's mechanical, as you say, then any hallucination the LLM does doesn't impact the actual text that's outputted. So I'm curious if that is a thing that people are using, or I don't know.
Yeah, do you mean a JSON schema, like as an answer? Is this so? For example, you might demand a ball and answer a true, false, and the LLM will give one of these two. It will not give anything else.
Right.
Yeah, that's called JSON schema, and it's basically forces the model to answer in a specific way, like with certain options. So we use this for when the model is when we send the segments for cross-checking.
Okay.
We want quick yes or no answers, true or false, and then and we force the model by demanding a JSON like JSON schema, SCHEMA. There is a way, yeah. So you basically there's a way when you call through the API to demand such a schema. You define it and then you demand it when you call it. As for the local LLMs, so GPT had I'm not sure if they still do it, but had a local option to download it, but it's quite heavy on the computer. It's and also I'm not so also. It's important in our pipeline that you have the option to use different models. So for example, you want the latest model for the translation, but for glossary extraction, maybe you don't want something too heavy. So and maybe different also companies like OpenAI and Google. Gemini, so that because some have free options, and we call the models a lot of times. So cost, is factored. So we want to have options. So we can't have 10 different local LLMs. Now, theoretically, if there is an LLM that can be run locally and does a specific job, like let's say punctuation, better than GPT 5.2 or Gemini 3, then the way the architecture is built, because it's modular, you can just plug it in with minimal change in the code. So, but now we don't run locally.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm always impressed in these conversations by how technical they can become. And the range from the technicality then to the very general is quite wide. And I think that's just evidence of where we are, in the moment here. Big questions and small questions, all important. Thank you very much to our presenters. We are all going to live with these technologies for the rest of our careers. And so one way or another, we all deal with this. And so I think their presentations, and more importantly, the work behind the presentations, it's a lot of work, and we are all the beneficiaries. So thank you to our panel, and thank you to Elena, and thank you for attending here this episode of the Global Daoist Studies Forum. There will be more. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Non, on peut partir.
Oui.
Great to see everybody.
Yeah, thanks very much, Elena. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
no problem. Yeah, that was beyond informative.
Yeah, Jonathan, how do you think that went?
Oh, it was great. I mean, great questions.
Yeah.
Really.
I still wanted to ask you both about this. If
Yeah,
you've
Are we still recording? Should we
looked
turn
at other, if you've looked at.
Let's maybe stop the recording.
Oh, yes. Okay.